a people, when they would conquer, they wouldn't take them slaves or take them captives back to Nineveh. They would disperse them. They would divide and conquer. They used the principle that if you can mix people together, I want to write this down. If you can mix people together, different cultures together that have different religions or different gods, they have different cultures and practices, and they have different languages, there's no way they can rise up and revolt. They cannot get organized. The dangerous part of a society is when they've got a unified religion, they've got a unified culture on some kind of values and purpose and goals of life, values of life, and they've got a unified language which allows them to communicate. That's a dangerous society. If you can break those things apart, well, you've got, it's easy to conquer. And Assyria used that principle. Verse 7. All this took place because the Israelites had sinned against the Lord their God, who had brought them up out of Egypt from under the power of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Takes them right back to their history. Jeroboam, their first king, told them, these golden calves brought you out of Egypt. But here the writer says, they rebelled against God, the one who brought them out of Egypt. Their whole history was messed. They didn't know who they were. They worshipped other gods, and they followed the practices of the nations the Lord had driven out before them. Realize God had seen that kind of behavior in the land here before, called the Canaanites. And that's why they were driven out. Realize the Canaanites in our minds are this corrupt people. And they ended up that way. But remember, when Abraham came into the land, 2000 BC, he had covenants with Aner and Eshcol, Mamre. These were Canaanites. He had covenants and treaties. He had friends in the land. They were a decent people. They had some kind of a society. The Canaanites, which would include the Phoenicians, were the ones that came up with the alphabet, even that we have yet today, a form of that alphabet. They were in a sense, a high developed culture. But sin entered in, and they went through a period of decline until finally, you read Leviticus, when Moses is getting ready to come in. It's a very boring book, you think, until you look at certain things. And he gives them a list. There's a chapter in there that tells them about sex. It says, you don't have sex like this. And it's a whole chapter on how not to have sex. And it's like, what kind of corruption is that? They needed to know that because they're living next to the Canaanites. And they're communist people. You don't have sex like this. You don't have sex with this. It's like, well, what would these people do? Who's thinking that way? The Canaanites. And these are the people you're going to run into, and don't do this. They had to be told certain things about sex. They had no idea. Well, the problem is those Canaanites were driven out. Well, now here comes the Israelites doing the same thing, and they're driven out. And that's why it says this right here. They worshipped other gods in verse 8 and followed the practices of the nations the Lord had driven out before them. That whole book of Leviticus, don't do this, don't do that, don't do that. It's like, what's that all about? We would never do that. It's like, they end up right there doing the same thing. The Israelites secretly did things against the Lord their God that were not right. From watchtower to fortified city, they built themselves high places in all their towns. They set up sacred stones and Asherah poles on every high hill and under every spreading tree. At every high place they burned incense as the nations whom the Lord had driven out before them had done. They're just like the Canaanites. You know, you think about Americans, you know what I'm saying? When I think of America, I think of a great country, a country I'm proud of. I think of our founding fathers. I think of a history. I think of a nation that is helping the world. That's who we are. But yet, as we go through these next 20, 30 years, what will history remember about us? Is that what's going to be written down in the history books? You understand what I'm saying? What are we going to be remembered for? Hollywood? You know, that we were open to all kinds of forms of marriage and sex. It's like, listen, again, here we go. You get over to the Middle East, and you get upset, and I get upset with how the Muslims treat Americans and how they view America, and it's kind of like, and then you talk to them, and you hear what they see and know what they know. It's kind of like, oh, yeah, okay. I'm not justifying what they do or what they think and stuff. I'm just saying it's kind of hard to stand up and say, but we are a good people when what they see being broadcast out of our country, from music to clothing to movies to, well, who knows what else, is like we look like Canaanites sometimes, or a lot of the time. Now, we don't want to be. There's a place that we can repent. We need to. But you know what I'm saying? You've got America that we want to be, and we've got America that we're drifting. And we're right in the same ball game as the Canaanites, the Israelites, and